Good evening. I'm Lori Johnson. President Obama is on his way to Asia, where he has some fence mending to do. Starting in Japan, the president will work to reassure America's Asia allies that the U.S. is committed to the region both economically and militarily. The president has promised a U.S. pivot on policy in Asia, but still needs to close the deal on its Trans-Pacific partnership. The U.S. has increased regional military deployments, but after watching Russia annex Crimea, some of America's Asian allies wonder if the U.S. is capable of backing them up against potential Chinese aggressions. After an official state visit to Japan, the president will become the first president since Lyndon Johnson to visit Malaysia. He's also visiting South Korea and the Philippines. The president is not making any stops in China. Joining us now is Gordon Chang. He lived and worked in China for 2 decades and is an author and a contributor at Forbes.com. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Well, what do you think the purpose of this trip is?
It really is to reassure our friends and allies in East Asia. They've been unnerved by the indecisive diplomacy of the White House, especially in connection with Syria and now, of course, Ukraine. So the idea is that we are going there, we're going to talk to our allies, and we're going to put them at the top of the list.
Well, it's very interesting that the president is skipping China, the biggest player in East Asia. Why do you think he's doing that?
Well, there's been too much Chinese diplomacy up to now. And because we have said that they are at the center of the international system, we are feeding their already inflated notions of self-importance. That is counterproductive. As the Chinese think they're important, they become more provocative and belligerent and have been causing trouble in the region, especially in the last 2 years.
Well, do you think our allies in the region have cause to be worried about China?
Well, they do have cause to be worried because Beijing believes that China should be bigger than it is today. And so they are causing friction in an arc of nations from India in the south to South Korea in the north. And of course, they're trying to close off this international water of the South China Sea, which they believe is an internal Chinese lake. And that brings us into play because if the United States has had any consistent foreign policy over the course of 2 centuries, it has been the defense of freedom of navigation. And China is threatening that.
What do you think the U.S. can do to counter China's new aggression?
Well, there are a couple of things that we need to do right away. One of them is we need to be very clear in public as well as in private that the United States will defend its allies and friends in East Asia and that we will be the guarantor of security and that the Chinese have to act within norms. Also, this Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a proposed free trade deal between the United States and about 11 nations in the region, is very important because it'll tie them to us rather than to China. So this is a very important part of the pivot, which is this rebalancing of American attention to East Asia.
Well, you mentioned Syria and Ukraine. Do you think our allies trust the Obama administration to defend them against China if necessary?
Certainly, the issue of Syria really got to both Tokyo and Seoul because President Obama announced that he wanted to use military force, but that he first had to go to get congressional approval. And that led many people in the region with defense treaties with the United States wondering whether if China attacked them, President Obama would have to go to Congress in order to honor our defense treaties.
All right, Gordon Chang, thanks for your insights and for joining us today.
Thank you.
And for the complete interview with Gordon, go to our website, cbnnews.com.